Why would anyone want to pursue a doctorate in community-based leadership? That's a very difficult question. You have to balance the academic side of things, which can often be perceived as being anti-community. But if you're pursuing community-based approaches, then obviously you're for the community in some way. So the balancing act or the trick is how do you bring both of those worlds together? One of the key tenets of authentic community engagement is that struggle working with communities rather than for communities. And how do you balance that? And so the fact that that was a key aspect of the program, and the fact for me that it was all done under education, I just think it's a marvelous program to bring those worlds together because for me, education encompasses everything. And even though that may seem obvious on the surface, to articulate that within community-based leadership is what this program is trying to do. And so you have people working in schools, you have people working in communities, in the nonprofit sector, artists from all the boroughs, from upstate. And I just and the biggest thing for me is that it's emerging. So it's the kind of program which is allowing itself to evolve, and I think that's critical. In the fall, I taught a course around the literature review process. And these are all courses in the community-based leadership doctoral program, a course called Transforming Teaching and Learning in School and Community. In the summer, I'll be teaching like a curriculum assessment course. And the way that I go about teaching them, I really try to invite the students into the process of co-teaching and co-learning together so that instead of a lecturer, I'm more of a facilitator. My work is really trying to articulate what it means to have an education of the head, the hands, and the heart, and what's the relationship among all those different pieces. For me, I've chosen agriculture because in a school of education, you can't really approach learning without focusing on our health. And to me, education has to be useful. If it's not really addressing problems in the community, then what is it for? And so, especially education, that approach to learning and teaching and being very explicit and really trying to articulate it and not just speak about it, but articulate it through song and poetry and dance and art and all these different ways through agriculture is what I'm contributing to this department, to the school. And just from the initial conversations that I've had with people in the community and people on campus, I'm learning about just small pieces of the history of agriculture in Staten Island and regenerative agriculture, which is what I'm interested in. There's a history here. And so I'm inspired to explore that and to see how to bring Staten Island to upstate New York where I am and bring upstate New York here to Staten Island and to do it all through education, dialogue and visits and so yeah, it's just it's like one big huge adventure for me. We explore this kind of concept of working with rather than for the community together because so many of the students are leaders in their own communities. We're not trying to create this either or scenario where it's either you're working with or for, but how can you balance it and do a little bit of both? But I think the with piece is really important because it requires you to open up a new way of being with a community. If you're just doing things for, you can start to impose a little bit versus if you're doing things with, it's more of a collective process. I like the students here, just when I walk around, it feels like home to me when I'm from San Francisco originally. Staten Island is new. I live upstate, but there's something about this campus and the students. It reminds me a lot of the experience I had in California, at the University of California campus, and working with the early academic outreach programs there. I can't, you know, I can't explain what that is, but I noticed that when I first got here and I just saw the students, it just felt comfortable. It felt like home. And then, the department that I'm in, the educational studies department, they've been really welcoming, of my ideas and my research ideas. And I feel like this is a place where I can really explore authentically what I'm really interested in education. I never wanted my research to just sit on a shelf. So one of the things that I'm interested in is community-based participatory action research, where you invite the community in to help you design the research, to help you conduct the research. The research is all about farming and regenerative agriculture and that relationship to education and how education can help us create healthier lives for ourselves and our communities. So that's not something that I want to do by myself. You have to invite the community into that process.
You can't be serious, man. Are you kidding? No. I mean, business, okay.
When I was working at Voices for Racial Justice, it's a nonprofit in Minneapolis. So many of us on the staff there were artists, and I remember we got together over Zoom one night. I think it was like during the pandemic, and we had all been kind of isolating, and we just said, let's just come together and just share our art. And I shared that song, and we decided, well, let's make a video out of this. And so we made a video, and it was an old song that I did years ago. But when I made the song, I just liked the track. I liked the melody, and I wrote something. But when we made the video, and it brought together all these communities in greater Minnesota and Minneapolis and rural and urban areas and multicultural, multi-ethnic communities, it made the song come alive to me. So when I think about it, it reminds me of this philosophy, I am because we are. It's an Ubuntu philosophy. And it's really just saying that, I exist because you exist because I exist. And the more we can see that in one another, the more beauty we'll see in our world and our environment. And that video shows me that every time I see that. A good friend of mine who helps me produce some of the tracks, he introduced this concept to me of layering, where, you don't want your track to just be kind of one dimensional. And so you layer, you'll have your drum beat, you may add a bass line, you'll have some voices, you may have some sounds from nature, because all of that makes the track more vibrant. And so I thought about that. I like that approach because it makes your track keep moving, and so you're never like bored with the track. And the same thing around teaching. I like to have a little bit of lecture, some video, maybe some music, bring in different voices, guest speakers. Like, you have to keep layering your class to me to keep it interesting and to keep different perspectives as a part of that setting.